Okay, so anybody who watches the first Blackbeard video I've done will notice there's some inconsistencies there if you're an expert. Because I reference the 1400s and I reference the 1700s. I wonder what's up with that. I'm going to tell you the story of the first Blackbeard and how those two tales are related and why I told the first story the way that I did. In the first video, right at the beginning, I said a couple of things, and throughout it, they were all technically true, but they apply to two different time periods. The first Blackbeard, yes, he made the coin. They took over the Cayman Islands, and they wanted to not build their own country. The second group wanted to build their own country there, and he had the coin of Blackbeard, and he took his name. The first one was a shipbuilder, a merchant, a good man, a civilian. They hired him in war. No, they went and said, dude, you're conscripted. You're going one way or the other. You're either going to go or we're going to execute you. But he owned 3 ships. And they were actually very advanced ships for the time because he was a merchant, a very successful one. And he was traveling all over the world. And because he had the best cannons on his ships that you could get anywhere in the world. He had his sails rigged with the best sail plan, one that he had designed. It was much more advanced than what was there, which isn't saying all that much in the 1400s, to be honest. I designed sails too. Mine are way more advanced than that. I could have built better sails than that with my understanding of sailing than the military ships were of the time. They just were big. They were cumbersome. The type of sailing systems they had worked well on smaller ships, but they just stuck them on bigger ships. Not so much. I mean, they had a sail plan, but it didn't make the ship very maneuverable by today's standards at all. You didn't start getting into really maneuverable sailing ships that were big warships until later in the 1600s, in the late 1500s. But in the 1400s, typical military ships were actually quite slow. And the pirates, they had, what became pirates, had way better ships. So I'm going to tell you his story real quick. So he gets told by the crown he's going to war. He leaves. But even his ships weren't that fast compared to the ships of the day. We're talking 1400s here. And they made good time, though, for the day. But it took them months to get to the coast where they were supposed to raid. See, the two Blackbeards had almost identical careers, almost identical lives, very, very similar. Both put in a situation where they had no choice. They went to war. Both put in a situation where when they arrived at the destination, they had originally planned their country, which was Britain, was no longer at war with that nation. But they had no way to know that. And they attacked. That's a serious problem. I get that. But there's another way to deal with things. See, this war, the wars between Britain and France, big time. If you look at the early English history, it was actually made England and English by a French king, a Plantagenet. Their history is so intertwined. They were warring back and forth constantly for money, for control of the most influential and expansive and lucrative lands. Because back in the day, the landlord got the taxes. And they were the ones making the money. You owned the land, you were making the money. So the trick was they wanted to have all the land. Well, that's a lot of greed and a lot of evil. And that's a whole nother story for another video. But for now, we're talking about the pirate's tale. And it's unfortunate that it was romanticized from the 1600s and the 1700s. I'm kind of doing it here in a way, but not really. I'm just telling you the history and trying to make it somewhat entertaining. So in the first video, I point out that the second Edward Teach, they did take over the Cayman Islands, but they were not the 8 pirate lords that made the coin. That's 2 separate incidences. One of the reasons I tell it like that is because a lot of people wouldn't believe me if I tried to tell them that it's a guy from the 1400s who actually did that, and they'd argue with me. I just told the story in a succinct way that makes a good tale to put out the video and hopefully get some views on it. But I also wanted the history to come across. Originally, I had planned on doing 2 videos back to back about that and explain the difference between their 2 lives. And I wanted to do this thing where I first describe basically the one tale that is common myth about him, which is what I did. Those are the factual parts of it, but they're intermixed between the first one and the second one. So now I'm going to separate them for you and go through it. The one in the 1400s, he did not take treasure for himself. He wasn't that kind of guy. He didn't build a mountain of treasure or a real nice house. None of them did. They were doing the other thing. They got together as a united navy, all these pirate merchant groups that had become pirates, got together and decided that they were going to fight back against these countries that had made them go to war and then threatened to kill them all. So what did they do? They started attacking their navies. Only they had like 30 ships between them. And they would just swarm an enemy navy formation of 12 ships, 14 ships, 18 ships, 24 ships, and kill them all. Apparently that was the biggest engagement, 24 ships. They knew they were going to lose, and they were trying not to have all their ships caught together. And even that just made it worse after that, because they just wrecked them. And within 6 months, they had sunk a third of the British Navy, to the point where they drew the rest of their ships home. So did other countries. And in the end, these pirates sunk, some will say 80% of the world's economy at that time, because they were not allowing any travel. They weren't letting ships travel. They would just take them. And these countries decided they had to do something about this, because they had taken over the Cayman Islands hard. And they did. But this video is getting kind of long, and I just want to cover the details and the separations between the two. So he is the one who made the coin in the first place. But later, the second Edward Teach, the second Blackbeard, he took that coin from a merchant in the 1700s. It was already famous as a coin. Collectors sought after pirate treasure from that time period, just like they do today. And he had this coin. And it got stolen by Blackbeard, which is hilarious, because the coin's history says that, the legend of it says that if you have the coin and you're not a collector, you can keep it. But if you're a collector, you'll lose it. Well, that happened. I'm not a collector. I found it. I knew what it was. It also says that the person who finds it will already know what it is. Well, so far, apparently that's been true all through the some 400 plus years of its history. Hey, that's pretty cool. Also, I should point out, not one of these 8 coins has ever been lost to history, because each of the 8 pirate lords made one of these coins. But the curse of the silver was true. See, these navies, they didn't have to fight these pirate lords. They did. They lost. And when they were seriously contemplating just putting all their last ships together and going at them, and they could have wiped them out if they'd have done that. They didn't have to, because of the silver. They ended up attacking each other, fighting amongst each other over the batch of silver they had taken. That, too, was a tale from the 1400s. The whole tale of the silver, the whole tale of the coin, that goes 1400s and before. The tale of the silver is way before. The tale of the coin comes in 1400s, which is why the dies on it are, one is 1,000-year-old, it's literally from like 474, I think, and the other one's from 1440s, 1447, I believe, or 1444, I can't remember. It's right in that range. And those are the 2 dies you see on each side of that coin. That's why it's so unusual. Pretty cool story, really. But it led me to learn a lot about history, and a lot about the history of the world, and really, in the end, that whole segment of history was defined by countries making it war for profit. That's what it was. Constant. A belief that they had to be at war with each other to dominate and take control of these things. One would take them, the other would take them back.